Okay, so have you ever like stopped and thought, what if what we think is real is only just this teeny tiny bit of a way bigger picture? Like, what if our senses, the things we use to figure out the world around us, what if they're kind of holding us back?
Interesting thought.
Hmm.
Yeah, I can see how that would be a real head scratcher.
Exactly. And the learner, that's precisely the kind of wild stuff we're going to explore today. You sent us some really cool material. And for this deep dive, we're zeroing in on Adata, from the Ajata other. We're going deep on pages 307 to 319.
Sounds like a plan. Those are some pretty key pages. A lot of meat on those bones.
Right. So the big question is, what are the golden nuggets on those pages? We want to make sure you walk away with those aha moments, but without like totally frying your brain. I mean, this section of Odd, it really goes deep into human consciousness. It's like, what are the limits? What's hiding in there? And how do we even try to make sense of everything using logic and our gut feelings?
Yeah, that's a dance we all do, right? Logic versus intuition.
Totally. So strap in because we're about to connect some dots and uncover some insights that might just shift your whole perspective.
I love it when that happens.
Me too. It's so cool. Okay, so right off the bat, I was struck by how these pages from RCC jump right into this huge question. How do we as humans even begin to grasp what's going on around us? Like, how do we make sense of the world?
It's such a fundamental question. And what's fascinating is the text points to our reliance on, our basic senses. Sight, hearing, touch, all that jazz. That's our starting point for building logic and how we think.
It all starts with those senses. And from there, the text introduces this idea of positivism. It's this way of thinking where only the stuff you can directly observe, the stuff you can measure, is considered like truly real.
Yeah, it's that whole seeing is believing thing.
Yeah.
I got to touch it to believe it.
Yeah, right. And, the text acknowledges that there's some merit to this approach. It can clear up doubts and create a common ground for experiences and building those logical frameworks. Like, if we can all point to an apple, we can agree it exists, right?
Absolutely. There's a certain solidness to it. But then the text throws in this interesting curveball by talking about these hardcore positivists, the EVLS.
Oh, yeah, those guys. They're like the positivist all-stars, right?
Exactly. And they went so far as to try and put limits on what science could ever figure out. They basically said, nope, we can't know that. That's beyond us. And the text uses the example of Auguste Comte.
Oh, yeah. He's the guy who famously declared ignorabimus, right? Which basically means we shall never know.
That's the one. And he was talking about the composition of stars. Like, what are those twinkling things actually made of? He said we'd never know.
Wow. And then, bam, along comes Oop. Talk about a game changer. Suddenly we could analyze starlight and figure out exactly what elements stars are made of.
It's a classic example of how limiting ourselves to just what we can directly sense can lead us astray. Like thinking that's all there is to know.
It's like saying we can only know what's on the surface of the ocean, so there's no point exploring the depths.
Right. So much more going on beneath the surface.
So true. And that brings us to the next big theme in these pages, human consciousness. The text describes it as that deep down feeling of being, that I am sensation.
Yeah, it's like the awareness of yourself as a unique individual.
Yeah.
A sense of self.
And then it gets into these two ideas, consciousness of the Shia and the Yujo. Now, this might sound a little heady for our listeners. The learner, if you're new to all this, think of the fire as the direct sensation of the ego. It's that pure, raw experience of I-ness.
That's a great way to put it. It's that immediate knowing of yourself. And the ooze is more about experiencing the ego through all the different things it's picked up along the way. All those impressions, memories, interactions with the world. It's like the self looking at itself through the lens of its own experiences.
So the movement of consciousness is all about those impressions changing, right? It's those reflections in the mirror of existence constantly shifting. And then there's this term, the plane of consciousness.
Yeah, like a snapshot of the totality of all those aspects at any given moment. It's the unique configuration of your awareness at that exact point in time.
Makes sense. And thinking, according to the text, is the process of this plane of consciousness moving, shifting, transforming as it interacts with the world around us.
And because it's always interacting with that external world, our thinking is always relative. It depends on context, our individual experiences, all those things.
It explains why my thoughts are so different when I'm wide awake and focused compared to when I'm like half asleep.
Exactly. So we've talked about the limits of relying solely on our senses and this whole idea of consciousness being this dynamic, ever-changing thing. And now, the text tackles a classic debate, intuition versus reason. But what's interesting is it doesn't pit them against each other.
Yeah, it's not like they're rivals battling it out in our minds.
Not at all. Instead, it presents them as two essential aspects of how we understand things. They both have their own valid pathways. The text even uses this image. Kabbalistic, meaning red will always be red, black will always be black. They have their own inherent nature.
So reason comes from the active part of our minds, the part that likes to analyze and break things down logically.
Right. It's that analytical side of us. And intuition is more like its passive counterpart. It's that quiet knowing, that gut feeling that often arises without us needing to go through a step-by-step thought process.
It's that knowing that just is. And the text emphasizes that to really progress and evolve, we need both. Intuition and reason got to work together in harmony.
Balance is key. And to illustrate this, it uses these really powerful examples from Greek mythology.
Oh yeah, those myths are so good. Like the story of Phineas. He was cursed with blindness because of his ability to see the future and then tormented by these creatures called harpies when he tried to live a normal life.
It's a cautionary tale, right?
Mm-hmm.
The text suggests it symbolizes what happens when you have this overabundance of passive intuition without the grounding of reason.
It's like being overwhelmed by insights and visions, but lacking the practical tools to actually use them in the real world. And then there's the legend of Orpheus, who focused so much on his own will and his musical talents that he neglected the feminine receptive principle symbolized by Eurydice.
He could only bring back her shadow from the underworld. And ultimately, he met a tragic end at the hands of the Bacchantes, who represent these untamed forces of intuitive, passive energy.
It's like these myths are warning us about the dangers of going too far in one direction or the other. You need both, intuition and reason. You can't have one without the other.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And this sets the stage for the text's discussion of experience and self-knowledge. It points out that in our everyday lives, we mostly operate through perceptions tied to our physical existence. The person left to their own devices relies on those senses first and foremost.
It's our autopilot setting, right? We interact with the world through what our bodies tell us.
Exactly. But then the text contrasts this with the quest for self-knowledge in the astral realm, where perception shifts to feelings and inner sensations.
So to really know ourselves, we need to go beyond the physical and explore our inner landscape.
That's where the real self-discovery happens. And the text makes this fascinating point, that in every experience we have, we're not just passive observers. We perceive things through both a harmonizing aspect of our being and our entire self.
We bring our whole selves to every interaction. That's so true.
And that leads to this double purpose in experiencing things. We're studying the experience itself, and we're using that experience to learn about ourselves.
Every interaction becomes a mirror, reflecting both the outer world and our inner selves, which brings us to this idea of consciousness constantly moving and transforming. It's not static, it's dynamic and always evolving.
Right. The text says our consciousness is always moving through different realms of reality, generating new experiences and encountering reflections of new acute, which you could think of as underlying spiritual realities or archetypes.
So life equals movement. Consciousness is always in flux. And then it gets into this really cool concept, the Rukida, the breath of Ea. Consciousness is described as the boundary reached by this breath.
It's like this fundamental life force, the energy that animates everything. This breath is always alive, and consciousness is the edge of its reach.
But the text also talks about the limitations of Yai, the earthly human, who usually can't go beyond physical consciousness.
Right, like we're only aware of a tiny sliver of the full spectrum of consciousness.
And that's where it mentions the Phulator, which relates to different planes of existence. It says consciousness on those higher planes isn't coordinated by its essence, but by the attributes it manifests through, specifically freedom and constraint.
It's almost like the rules of the game change on those higher levels.
Exactly. And it uses the example of time. In our physical world, time is a very concrete thing. But in the astral world, it becomes more fluid, even reversible.
It shows how reality isn't fixed. It shifts depending on the level of consciousness you're operating from.
Totally. And now we get into the cyclical nature of consciousness and the whole reincarnation thing. The text describes this oscillation of consciousness, a back and forth movement in a vertical direction. Everything above our current level is real, and everything below is potential.
It's like we're constantly reaching up towards higher levels of awareness.
And as we evolve, the range of this movement expands. We can experience more of those different levels.
The text then lays out these stages of evolution. It starts with basic matter, like nebulae, then progresses through crystals, plants, animals, until we get to humans with the emergence of pure spirit.
It's this amazing unfolding of consciousness across different life forms. And the ultimate stage is when consciousness reaches the limits of Ea and the individual embodies as the great initiate.
It's this incredible realization of human potential, where the individual becomes one with the divine. And then the journey continues. There's a voluntary dissolution, a transcendence beyond physical limitations.
It's like going beyond even the concept of death as we understand it. And that connects to the difference between life on Earth and these extended periods of existence in space. It's all driven by the rhythm of Ea, which creates these cycles of birth and death.
Our lives here are just one phase in a much larger cosmic cycle.
And our degree of consciousness is depicted as this continuous curve, with the dips representing the periods between incarnations. It's like we're briefly illuminated in the physical world and then retreat back into potentiality.
Fascinating, isn't it? And the text points out that even within a single lifetime, our consciousness rises to a peak and then gradually declines. True full consciousness is this fleeting moment at the apex.
It really highlights the transient nature of our experience here. So the last part of this section delves into self-activity and the whole question of why we even exist. It brings in this idea from Hegel. Yeah.
Which basically means the act of striving as an individual is its own purpose. It's like flexing your powers, playing with your potential. That's what brings life to what was once just a dormant possibility.
So the tension between opposing forces, that duality, is actually the engine that drives creation and all that. And humans, well, we live in a world of impulses that are constantly being realized, but we can tap into this deeper knowledge of those fundamental principles through the feeling of synthesis.
We can intuitively grasp how those seemingly opposite forces are actually connected, part of something bigger.
And the text ends by saying that the development of humanity and our self-awareness are both the goal and the result of everything we do. It's like this never-ending feedback loop where we shape our consciousness by how we engage with the world.
Which in turn shapes our future actions and how we continue to evolve. It's a pretty beautiful cycle when you think about it.
So, the learner, we've covered a lot of ground here, from how our senses can limit us, to the dynamic nature of consciousness, the dance between intuition and reason, the importance of experience and self-discovery, and this epic journey of consciousness through different planes of existence and lifetimes.
It's a lot to digest, I know. But what I find so powerful about all this is that it gives us this amazing framework for understanding reality and our place in it. It shows us that things aren't always what they seem, and encourages us to develop both our logical and intuitive sides.
And hopefully you've had some of those aha moments along the way. Maybe you've even discovered a new appreciation for the sheer complexity of human understanding.
It's definitely a journey worth taking.
So here's something to chew on, the learner. If we really can expand our consciousness, if we're part of this ongoing evolution across lifetimes, what does that mean for how we live now? What does it mean for the choices we make?
It's a big question.
Right. It makes you think, doesn't it? How does this understanding of our cosmic journey change how we view our everyday lives?
It makes you realize that every action, every interaction, every thought, it all contributes to the bigger picture.
Yeah, it really puts things in perspective. And on that note, the learner, a huge thanks for sharing these awesome sources with us and for joining us on this deep dive. Hopefully, you've gotten some new perspectives, maybe even some inspiration to keep exploring the Abhiji or other wisdom traditions out there.
Always more to learn.
Until our next deep dive, keep those questions coming.
And keep those minds open.